Right, good afternoon again, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Managing Grief During the Holiday Season. My name is Marissa Frieder, and I am the Assistant Director for WorkWell NYC. And today's topic is something that I think is just so universal. We all face loss and grief in our lives, and whether it's your first holiday season without a loved one or your 15th, it can be really a difficult time of year, especially when everyone around you can be, filled with joy and happiness and all those things. And so we're so fortunate today to be joined by Kathy Nugent, who is a licensed clinical social worker at CancerCare. She has a lot of experience working with families around this topic, and Kathy will be sharing some strategies to help us cope with not only our own personal losses, but how we can help support those around us who are facing losses. And before I turn it over to Kathy, I just want to share a little bit about WorkWell NYC and what we do. So WorkWell NYC is the city's workplace wellness program, and we are here to help all city employees live well and work well and be well. So our goal is to create work sites that make it easier for employees to be healthy and live active lifestyles. And we know that health is so much more than just your body, your mind. It's financial, it's emotional, and health exists on a spectrum. And we want to be here for you with health and well-being resources and programs and support to help you move more, eat well, be well, and take action to prevent disease, no matter where you are on your health journey. And so obviously grieving can have a major impact on our physical health and our mental health all year round, but especially this time of year. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to guide us through some do's and don'ts about coping with grief and loss during the holiday season.
Thank you, Marissa. It's my pleasure to be here today to talk about how to manage grief during the holidays. Before we begin to talk about how to manage grief during the holidays, I think it's important to first talk a bit about what is grief, what's anticipatory grief, and some of the misconceptions and myths about grief. Having a better understanding of what grief is and what it is not can help us to cope with not only our own losses, but also those of our friends and our colleagues. So what is grief? Grief is a normal, natural, and necessary process associated with loss. Some examples of loss include the death of a loved one, the ending of an important relationship, job loss, loss through theft or loss of independence, through disability and illness. It can even be the death of a beloved pet. Grief does not come easily. Most of us are afraid to let ourselves feel it. Grief can be painful, confusing, and overwhelming in its intensity. It's also common for us to have expectations of how we should feel when someone we love dies. This can make grieving even more difficult. Grief has many phases. Each person's experience of grief is unique. No two people grieve the same way. There's no right way to grieve. Often when I worked with grieving people, they ask me if what they're feeling and experience is normal. And in most cases, I tell them, yes, their response is normal. Grief is like a roller coaster of feelings. It's not a straight journey, but lots of ups and downs. Some of the feelings one may experience are sadness, anger, grief, anxiety, panic, loneliness, fatigue, disbelief, helplessness, shock, yearning, depression, and relief. Some physical responses may be tightness in the chest, inability to sit still, restlessness, difficulty concentrating, confusion, crying, decreased energy, social withdrawal, and searching behavior. Now I'd like to turn it over to Marissa, who will do a poll.
Thanks, Kathy. And so, we just want to launch a poll before we start talking about grief. So it's a true/false question. Tell us, do you think that grief has predictable stages and takes a year to recover from? So we'll just give a couple of seconds for people's responses to come in. And let's go ahead and wrap that up. So, all right, we've got a very insightful crew here. 90% of people say false, that grief has predictable stages and takes a year to recover from. So Kathy, will you tell us more about that?
Very good. There really are no predictable stages. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler have mentioned that there are 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But this is not a linear process in the journey, and it's people tend to jump from one stage to the next and jump back. So again, these are not predictable stages, and you don't necessarily go through all of them. The next myth or misconception is that you have to cry. And again, no, you do not have to cry. In fact, many people do not cry. It makes it hard for those of us to understand if they are in fact grieving. The next myth is there's only one way to grieve. There are actually many ways to grieve. And one is intuitive grief. And that's when we wear our grief. It's an open book with our feelings. We show our feelings through crying. Many people are like that. And then there's those who use instrumental grief, and that's more thinking than feeling, less expressive of feelings. They're doers. They keep busy. They try to fix things. And many times people will do fundraisers to support a cause, or in case of cancer, to support a cancer organization. Those are the instrumental grief. The next myth is it takes a year. Again, no, everyone is different. And I like to visualize for my clients that they have a hole in their heart. That hole does not close, but you learn how to live around the hole in your heart. In fact, it is said that the second year of the grief experience can be more difficult than the first, because when you go through the first year, these are all the first anniversaries, the first holidays, first birthdays. The second year, you've already gone through all the firsts, and many times the support that one would have during that first year becomes less. Time heals. Time allows for adjusting to life without love, without the loved one. The pain may not be as acute, but you learn to live with it. You learn to manage the pain. And then there's no major decision making for the first year. Again, everyone is different. Some people do make major decisions, but then many people do not. Children do not grieve. Children do grieve, but they grieve very differently from adults. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how children grieve. The family will grow closer. And this is not necessarily so. Many families are torn apart. There are disagreements over wills, estates, unpaid debts, unfinished business. Sudden death and unexpected death are the same. Unfortunately, it is not the same. For many people, a sudden death, there's no time to say goodbye or to prepare. When there is expected death, many people do have time to prepare. They make amends with others, their wishes for their families, their life reviews, and they can count their blessings. Grief intensity is directly related to love. Grief intensity is not an indicator of how much we loved someone who we have lost. Depression is inevitable. People require therapy. Sadness is a common feeling experienced with loss, but is not always depression. Not everyone will require or seek therapy. And then lastly, medication. Medication is never indicated or required. Sometimes medication can be helpful, but one should be followed closely by a psychiatrist and their other medical team to make sure that they're on the correct medication for them and that the dosage is correct. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about anticipatory grief. And Ann Eldridge, who's a doctor, has defined anticipatory grief as anticipatory grief, or grief that occurs before death, is common among people who are facing eventual death of a loved one or their own death. This kind of grief is not often discussed or recognized. Symptoms are similar to grief, but it can also be different. Often grief before death can involve anger, loss of emotional control, and this may be because the person may find themselves in a kind of limbo, trying to maintain hope and a life with their loved one, but at the same time recognizing that they're dying. This type of grief can include many different losses: loss of companionship, changing the roles in the family, fears of financial changes, and loss of dreams. Not everyone experiences anticipatory grief. Sometimes people are afraid to look at this grief because they're afraid they're going to give up hope. Anticipatory grief is not a substitute for grief later on and doesn't necessarily shorten the grief, but it can help with closure. It may be a good time to reconnect with friends, family, and grant forgiveness, and it can be a very healing time. Anticipatory grief is a normal process in the continuum of grief. An example would be, I'm working with a woman now whose husband has a late stage cancer, and she finds that she's extremely angry because their life has totally changed. They used to spend a lot of time traveling. They're not able to travel now, and her husband, who was quite ill, has withdrawn. And this has been a real problem for her. And what our focus is to help her to certainly share those experiences of sadness and grief, and kind of to look at what her life may look like in her losses, but also to live in the moment, to appreciate what she has, that her husband is here, and to focus on one day at a time. Another example that I recall is a young mother that I worked with many years ago. And her husband also had a very serious cancer, and she had a 5-year-old. And she came into session one day, and I was working with her as a caregiver. She came into one session and she was extremely angry. And she shared with me that she was so angry with her husband because here she was taking care of a 5-year-old, working and also taking care of him, and he was focused on having their kitchen remodeled. And the more we talked about it, she shared that this was something that they both were planning on doing, but she was angry because she couldn't understand why he was focused on wanting to do this kitchen when she was so busy taking care of him, her child, the household, and everything else. And I said to her, do you think possibly that your husband is really taking care of you and wants you to have that kitchen for when he's not here? And that really helped her to understand that what she was going through was important, that she expressed those feelings to me, but also to live in the moment. And the interesting thing is, recently she shared with me that through the years, she used to do the holidays, she used to do Thanksgiving, and she couldn't do it for many years after her husband died. But recently she had the family come back and she did it. And she said, you know, Kathy, it was really the best thing that my husband could have done for us, for me and my little girl, because now we have this beautiful kitchen, and every time I entertain, I think of him, and I'm grateful. So the holiday season, let's talk a little bit about the managing during this time when we're dealing with loss. This time of the year is hectic, overwhelming to many people. The end of the year holidays are certainly a happy time for most of us, but the stress of the season puts many of us on such an edge that we wish it would all just go away. In findings of a 2015 survey conducted by Healthline, which is a consumer health information site based in San Francisco, California, they found that 62% of respondents described their stress level as very or somewhat elevated during the holidays, while only 10% reported no stress during the season. Among the holiday stresses listed by respondents were the financial demands of the season, negotiating the interpersonal dynamics of family, and maintaining personal health habits, such as an exercise regimen. So under normal circumstances, we see that this time of year can be stressful. So for those of us managing grief during this time, this can be particularly challenging. Remember that you're not alone. Acknowledge any grief in your life. Acknowledge that the holiday may in fact be difficult. Ask for help if you need it. One of my bereaved clients that I'm working with now, a gentleman in his 70s, whose wife died less than 6 months ago, told me just 2 days ago that this time of year is like being in a bad play, but you don't want to have the part. So now let's talk about some of the tips to help us support yourself and your loved ones during the holidays and throughout the year. So be honest with your feelings. It's okay to be honest with your feelings. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to have all feelings. And it's okay to have moments of feeling happy. This is not a betrayal. Keep a journal of those moments of feeling happy. Reflect on them on days that you're sad. Be able to look back on them. Robert Emmons, an authority on positive therapy, says that recalling moments of gratitude associated with ordinary events or valued people in your life can give you the potential to interweave a sustainable theme of gratefulness into your life. One of the clients that I've worked with this past year also, a gentleman in his 80s, he keeps a gratitude diary and writes down daily memories of good times with his wife, as well as things that are important each day, finding one or two little things that he can be grateful for. He also shared with me that he keeps a playlist of music that he turns on every day when he comes into his home. During the holiday meals, it's important sometime to remember our loved ones. The fellow that I mentioned just before, talking about the play that he's in that doesn't want to have the part, he shared with me just again this week that at Thanksgiving, he read a poem that really reflected on the gratitude that he had for his wife and his memories, and that she would want them all to be smiling instead of crying. Some of the things you might do during the holiday for remembrance is say a prayer before the meal in remembrance of your loved one, light a candle in memory of your loved one, take a turn sharing favorite stories of your loved one, have a special toast. One client said that his wife was one of 5 sisters, and every time they came together for family gatherings, they would have a toast, and they were planning on doing that again this year. Pull out old photos and share those memories. Looking at pictures can serve as a visual reminder, which can serve as cues to trigger thoughts of gratitude. I'd like to share just a quote from Dr. Seuss, and this quote, he said, "Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened." Holiday rituals and traditions. It's okay to reevaluate rituals. Does it work this year or maybe not? And it's okay to shake them up. You can decide what to keep and what not to keep. And it's okay to start new traditions. Maybe you'll start a new tradition in memory of your loved one. Maybe you'll hold on to them. One of the girls in my office shared that, they were continuing to use the same recipes as their loved one. And this was their way of holding on to a tradition, but also remembering that loved one. Communicate your needs. Tell others what you need, what you want to do, and what you may not want to do. Also be aware how others are managing to grieve. Remember, everyone does grieve differently. And remember that family members and friends will not understand your grief. This is a reality. They will not get it. Again, they may be grieving too, and differently. Now I'm going to turn it over to Marissa again for another poll.
Right, it's time for another true false statement. So is it not okay to say no to holiday gatherings and invitations? So can you say no? Give people just a moment to get their results in. And let's go ahead and close the poll. So 70% of people say false. That it's actually not okay to say no to holiday gatherings and invitations. So Kathy, tell us what's best.
Yeah.
And
you know what? It's okay to say no. It is okay to say no, and don't feel guilty about it. I look at this as really the gift of no. It's okay. I think sometimes we all feel pressured that we have to say yes and go to everything that we're invited to. You don't have to. It doesn't make you a bad person. I really believe that this is part of self-care. You can pick and choose what you want to do, but the key is to communicate your needs to others. Also have an exit strategy. I realize that most of you are here in New York City, but if you should happen to drive outside of the city for a social gathering, drive yourself. This way you can have an exit strategy. You can leave when you want. Take Uber, a cab, bus, whatever you have to do. You don't want to feel like you're stuck wherever you're going. This again is an example of self-care and taking control of what you can control. Remember, there are a lot of personal triggers that go on, not only during the holidays, but throughout the year. And don't be surprised by what might trigger your sadness. Triggers are very personal. A song may trigger sadness, a movie, going by a special place you may have enjoyed with your loved one. And it's also okay to be jealous of others who are celebrating the holidays. Again, this is all about self-care, paying attention to our feelings and how we react. One of my clients, Tom, told me that he drives past to get from one point in Bergen County to the other to visit his family. He has to drive past a rehab center that his wife had been at. And this is a trigger for him. And I said to him, have you thought about taking the shortcut around it? And he was actually very, very intuitive. And he said, you know what? I have to feel this. So I drive past it. I have to confront my feelings. Then the other thing that we can do is make lists. And this can be very helpful for us. Look at the holidays as a series of small events rather than an endless stream of pain. If we look at one event at a time, small steps, make it simple, that can help us. Grief can make it harder to remember and to concentrate. So write down important dates on the calendar and make a list of things that you need to do. Shop early and try to buy things online if that helps. And this will help bypass the holiday shopping craze. The other thing you might think about is make gifts. Homemade gifts are important, and they also can be very thoughtful. Maybe make a memory photo album. Make donation in loved one's name instead of a gift. One of my clients told me that he was thinking about bypassing gifts for his adult children and possibly making a donation to a foundation in memory of his loved one. But the key to that is to communicate his needs, which he did. He spoke with his kids only last week, and they all agreed they would do that. However, he is still buying gifts for the grandchildren. And then children. This is, anytime that I speak, I always bring kids into it because I think our children are so important. And we are role models for our children too. And remember that our children do grieve, but they grieve differently than we do as adults. They have a right to their feelings too. They could be happy one moment and then sad the next. It is all okay. I had a client that I worked with many years ago whose father died, and he died when this guy was 13. And his mom tried to bring him in for counseling services with his grief, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And mom was very concerned because he wasn't expressing his grief. Went through high school, got to college, and that's when his grief hit him. And he sought counseling while he was in college, and he actually came back to speak. We do a bereavement camp, which I'll mention a little bit later, but he talked about his journey and that when he went to college, that was when he felt the loss of his dad. So I'm bringing this up because remember that grief, there's no timetable. And for our children, sometimes we think they're not grieving, but they are, but in their own way. In Sheryl Sandberg's and Adam Grant's book, Option B, which I highly recommend, she speaks about raising resilient kids after loss. We all want to help children find a way forward after loss. Kids need to feel a sense of safety and support. To help build resilient kids, there are 4 core beliefs. They have control of their lives. They can learn from failure. They matter as human beings, and they have real strengths to rely on and share. Children need the support of their family, schools, and the community. I'll turn this over to Marissa again.
All right, we're gonna do one last poll. So this one, again, true, false. Self-care is especially important to focus on during the holidays. So put in your responses, true or false. And we will go ahead and close this now. Right. Everyone's in agreement. Self-care is the way to go.
Good
Fabulous.
response. You all get 100. Yeah, I think, self-care is so important. Coping with loss, regardless of the time. Self-care is very, very important. But during the holidays, don't forget to take time out for ourselves. I think sometimes we all forget about that, regardless of what that loss is. It's such a busy, busy time. Give yourself a present. Give yourself a present to live in the moment too, to take a moment to breathe. Go on a trip, go to a play, an event, concert, sporting event. Exercise, really important to keep exercise. Go for a walk, whether it's 10 minutes or half an hour or whatever. Meditate, stop and breathe. Pray. I think sometimes that's so important. For many of our families, faith and spirituality can be a source of support and strength. If you need support, please seek professional help. Don't be embarrassed. We all need help from time to time. And there are many organizations that provide bereavement support. CancerCare, the organization that I work with, provides bereavement counseling in our New York City office, also our New Jersey office and Long Island. And those services are face-to-face or else through support groups. And there are also many groups that are online. So again, part of self-care is recognizing when we need help, taking time out and slow down. I love to share this cartoon, and I'll read it to you. Sometimes when you hurt inside, the only medicine that'll help is a great big hug. And I love this cartoon for two reasons. Hugs can be so healing for both adults and kids, and hugs also connect us to each other. Another quote I'd like to share is about hope. Hope is being able to see that there's light despite all the darkness. Desmond Tutu. Loss can be an opportunity for growth, and sometimes it's hard to see that. Hope, you do not forget your loved one, but hope can help you to move forward in time. Dealing with feelings, even painful ones, can help build resilience and hope. The key to resilience for anyone is hope. Hope keeps people from giving in to despair. Psychologists call this grounded hope, the understanding that if you take action, you can make things better. Focus on what you can control each day, not on what you cannot control. And I love this quote also, and we've used this quote a few years ago at our Healing Hearts Family Bereavement Camp. Each year we have a theme, and that year our theme was the ocean. Grief is like the ocean. It comes on waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water's calm, and sometimes it's overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. And that quote's by Vicki Harrison. Acts of kindness, I think this is so important today. We're dealing with so much, not only personally, but as a nation. Do for others. Sometimes helping others can help to manage one's sadness. Acts of kindness connects us to others. Volunteer at a soup kitchen, a homeless shelter. Find something to volunteer for. Donate clothing, gifts, toys to children, toys to tots during this holiday season, as well as throughout the year. Help make someone else feel better during the holidays. Connecting with others is so important, and paying it forward with acts of kindness can be healing. And remember, kindness does not stop at the holidays. An 80-year-old widower that I'm working with volunteers at a nursing home every day. He also drives a blind gentleman to work 3 days a week. And he manages to walk every day too. He's pretty amazing. And now kindness in the workplace. We've talked a lot about loss within our families and the community, but I'd also like to focus a little bit on our workplace. And I do believe that everything we touched on today can be pertain to the workplace. But one suggestion is please do not ignore the person who's grieving. Ask how they're doing today. And I think that's important when we say today, not tomorrow. How are you today? Listen to them, and please don't give advice or suggestions. Remember, your experience with grief and loss may be very different from your colleagues. and commit to being there after the holidays. After the holidays, everyone gets back to their routines. But remember, our colleagues and friends who are grieving will have many moments throughout the year where sadness may be felt. Anniversaries, birthdays, other special events and memories. Check in with them regularly. Now I'd like to share a poem, and I think this really points to the need to kind of keep in touch with our loved ones and our colleagues. The Elephant in the Room by Terry Kettering. There's an elephant in the room. It's large and squatting, so it's hard to get around it. Yet we squeeze by with "How are you?" and "I'm fine," and 1,000 other forms of trivial chatter. We talk about the weather. We talk about work. We talk about everything else except the elephant in the room. There's an elephant in the room. We all know it's there. We're thinking about the elephant as we talk. It's constantly on our minds. For you see, it's a very big elephant. But we do not talk about the elephant in the room. Oh, please say his name. Oh, please say Dad again. Oh, please, let's talk about the elephant in the room. For if we talk about his death, perhaps we can talk about his life. Can I say Dad and not have you look away? For if I cannot, you are leaving me alone in a room with an elephant. And I'd like to end this by just sharing a quote by Helen Keller. When one opens the door of happiness, when one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one which has been opened for us. And I'd just like to share some of the programs, a little bit about CancerCare. For those of you that don't know about CancerCare, CancerCare is the leading national organization providing free professional support services and information to help people manage the emotional, practical, and financial challenges of cancer. Our comprehensive services include counseling, support groups over the phone, online, and in person, educational workshops, publications, and financial and copay foundation assistance. All CancerCare services are provided by oncology social workers and world-leading cancer experts. This slide just shows you a little bit about where we are and our location. Our national office is right here in Manhattan. Our New Jersey office is in Paramus, and then we have our Long Island office out in Syosset. And our clients, anyone interested in services from CancerCare, can call our Hope line, which is also on the slide. It's 1-800-813-HOPE. Thank you all. There's one other thing I want to share with you. These are other resources. For CancerCare, you can contact us for bereavement around cancer, but these are some other websites which can provide support with bereavement. So please take a look at them and check them out. And please remember what we talked about. It's okay to ask for help. And during this time, as we've discussed, it's very, very stressful. So please, if you need support, please call one of these organizations or reach out to CancerCare if your loss has been through cancer. Again, I want to thank you all for your time and happy holidays to you and your families. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Marissa.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I just want to share that we will be sharing these resources. We'll share the slides. We'll also share that poem that Kathy shared, that Elephant in the Room poem. That was very powerful. But I just also want to flag, in addition to all the bereavement resources that Kathy mentioned, CancerCare and the others, some additional resources that are available just for city employees and their families, or rather EAP, our New York City Employee Assistance Program, is available for employees and their families who are struggling with grief or any other mental health needs or issues. They also are a great resource that can come on site following crises at the workplace. So a lot of times, the loss of a coworker, potentially sudden, can cause a lot of just emotion, and everyone goes back to work and things aren't as they used to be, and EAP has a lot of experience kind of coming on site and handling that. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to them if it is a resource that could be helpful to you. And lastly, NYC Well is a free 24-hour, 7-day-a-week mental health support hotline for anybody, anyone in the city. So you can tell anybody you know, they can go to NYC Well. They can call 888 NYC Well, they can text, or they can chat. So, you know, if you're maybe not comfortable speaking on the phone, but think you might need some help, texting, chatting are great options. And the resources do come in a range of languages that they can translate into. I just want to go back and talk about our gratitude challenge that we're doing right now. You know, Kathy spoke about how gratitude and grief can be very connected. And this is a challenge that we're currently underway. Hopefully you've heard about it. But we have a 12 days of gratitude. Today is day 4, but it's not too late to catch up. We have a different activity and kind of prompt every day. So you can go to our website, nyc.gov/bewell. You can download the challenge guide, follow along, kind of do these activities during these 12 days, or maybe not. Maybe this is something that you're not ready for at this moment in time, wherever you're coping with your grief, but something that maybe could be beneficial to you later on. So, you know, gratitude is worth doing all year round. And you can also follow along with us in real time on Instagram. We're going to be sharing prompts and posts from city employees about what they're grateful for. And you're welcome to submit your gratitude as well that way. So more information on that will come with your follow-up email. But now I just want to thank everyone again for attending and invite anyone who has questions to type them into the little chat box at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. And I also want to just remind you all, we'll be sending out a survey right after today's webinar. We really value your feedback, so any feedback on this topic or future topics you'd like to see are much appreciated. And let me take a look at the questions that are coming in. So someone is asking about, how do you grieve, I guess it's about that anticipatory grief of a family member who is living, but has an illness like dementia, something that is really affecting how that person, you know, presents themselves. How would you recommend someone copes with that?
Presenting themselves.
So someone, you know, I think like with the dementia, it's like the person is there and they're alive, but they're not really there. And how do you cope with that?
I think it's important, again, self-care for that family member. The question is about a family member, how do they cope with it? Again, I think if that person is not really in the moment or is not aware what's happening to them, I think it's difficult for the caregiver. I think the caregiver, what I would recommend is really reach out to get support for themselves, to be able to talk about what this change, not only with their loved one, but also the change is how it's impacting their lives. So that would be my first recommendation, is to really seek some support to be able to begin to talk about really that anticipatory grief, because while that person is still living, they are sick, and you're grieving that sense that that person's really not there. And being able to talk about that loss can help you to stay in the moment so that you can address your concerns, your feelings, your sadness, but yet still be present with your loved one to be able to support them in the best way that you can. So that would be my recommendation. The other thing is, if you can't speak with somebody, again, there may be organizations where you can call and speak with somebody, but I think sometimes writing is also important too. You could keep a journal of your feelings. And again, you know, I really do believe sometimes we have to live in the moment and appreciate what we have today, because none of us know what tomorrow will be. So that would be my recommendation. Seek some support, either face-to-face or telephone, and then maybe keep a journal, some way of getting out your feelings of sadness and loss, but also reflect on the good things too.
Thank you. Got a couple of questions with a similar theme about someone who's grieving in your life. Should you ask them how they're doing? When should you leave them alone? Should you bring up the elephant in the room, or just should you ask about the grief specifically, or just say, how are you doing today? You know.
Definitely. Communication is key. And I think sometimes we don't communicate with our loved one who's sick because we think we're protecting. And I've worked with so many patients as well as caregivers where this magical thinking, maybe you could call it, because that's what kids go through, magical thinking. So sometimes if we begin to communicate, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? Are there things I can help you with? And it's okay to cry. I think sometimes we're afraid to cry in front of our family member. Again, this is so important. It's giving permission that it's okay. And I think sometimes when we can begin to talk about what's happening in the room, we break down those barriers, because so many times when we don't speak, a barrier, that wall just gets higher and higher and it becomes more difficult. And again, the nice thing about being able to begin that grieving process or talking about what's happening today, relationships can change. Many times they can become much better because you're able to begin to really share memories, and lots of good things can happen. But communication is the key, and begin that process.
Thank you. We've getting a couple of questions also about, we spent a lot of time talking about grieving a loved one, but as you said in the beginning, sometimes you can grieve something, not a person. Like if you're grieving, if you're getting divorced, you're grieving a marriage. If you have a tragedy in your life and you lose a house or things or a job, do you have any specific advice or guidance around that?
It's very similar to loss of the person. Is not, it may be like a job or as you mentioned, Marissa, many different things. I think everything that we talked about today can pertain to that. Again, allow yourself to have those feelings. All right. Every day could be, something could come up that we're grieving, but I think it's so important to be real with our feelings. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to share it. Ask for help. I think a lot of times we're afraid to ask for help. And also our colleagues, families, and friends don't know how to help. So we can't assume that people know what we need. If we don't let people know what we need, we can't be helped. So I would just say, again, I think communication is the key in so many different ways, whether that loss is, a job, a home, a divorce. Again, communication, being able to let people know what you need and how they can help you. Yeah. And I think the other piece that we talked a little bit about is reaching out to other people. I think being able to touch others. I think being connected to people is so important. Try not to isolate yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I know you mentioned you've done bereavement camps with children. So when children are saying, they miss somebody who's not there, or just kind of going through their own understanding of grief, what's the best way to handle that as an adult or a caregiver? I would
let the children talk. Let the children talk, share pictures. And sometimes it's difficult for parents. Again, seek that help. I know CancerCare, we have social workers that work with kids. I mentioned the camp. Can I say a little bit about the camp? Sure. CancerCare, we do a Healing Hearts Family Bereavement Camp every year. And this is a free camp for families who have lost a loved one to cancer. And we typically have anywhere from 27, 20, 30 families that come. We do it up in the Poconos. And the beauty of that is that sometimes our kids feel very alone with grief. If they've lost a mom, dad, sibling, they think they're the only kids in the world who are experiencing this. And the beauty of being with other kids and meeting other children, which they can do at this camp. By the way, this camp is for the whole family, not just children. They get to meet other kids who are similar. And the bonds that these kids make with each other is incredible. And now they connect on Facebook and all these other ways that are beyond me. But anyway, it is such a powerful, powerful place for these kids to be able to connect and know that they're not alone, and know that they can talk about mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, and it's okay. And it's just a wonderful. So I would encourage, if your children are grieving, ask how they're doing. And again, you're not going to see the grief all the time, but they are grieving in their own way. And make sure the schools are aware when there's an illness, whatever it is, that the schools are aware that there's some problems going on in the home. because kids are in school a lot more than they're home these days. So I think that's really, really important. There are services out there for children who are grieving.
Yes, and I know another one of the resources, A Caring Hand, is another that's on our resource list. Another great organization that does similar work for children. And I know there are many of them out there.
Yep.
So thank you. Let's see. I'm trying to come up with just a couple more questions so that everyone can, go back to work at the end of this hour. But how do you have any, we just talked about children, but if you have adult children and they lose a parent, their other parent, do you have is there anything different about your recommendations for that relationship? Being that they're adults and
because they're adults.
Yeah.
We all grieve differently. So, you're going to have adult kids that don't want to talk about it. Again, when we're talking about the holidays, I would hope that one of the things that you do around the table is at least mention that person, have a toast. And again, everybody is going to grieve differently, but I think whether it's believe me, there's going to be tears. That happens. And we expect that. But sometimes it also leads to laughter. I didn't say much about laughter, but laughter is so important. It's when you laugh, I think you also, for me, it's healing. I think laughter is such a part of life and we have to do more laughing. So again, Marissa, adult children are like adults, but also like kids. We're all going to grieve differently. But again, we don't want that elephant in the room. So talk about that person. And if they can't handle it, they'll let you know. So some of the things I just want everybody to hold on to is communication, key, so important. That elephant in the room, mention that loved one's name, talk about the loss. And again, some people will be able to listen to it and some can't, and that's okay. I think all feelings are okay.
So true. It's so important to remember. Just I'm going to do one last question. I think this is a really relevant one in our sphere, which is what do you say to a coworker you haven't seen in a while or who may not know that you just had a death in your family? If you say hi to someone in the pantry, in the hallway, in the elevator, do you say, if they ask, how are you, do you say, I'm fine? And even though it might not be true.
Response.
Or do you say, oh, I just lost someone,
Either way, I think you could respond, I'm doing okay today. I really believe in, when we say, I'm doing okay, that leaves it so open. But I think, again, if we focus on today, I'm doing okay today. And maybe some days that, excuse me, you're not doing okay. Say it. Today is not a good day. One of the phrases that I often use with some patients that I deal with when somebody asks, how are you doing? To say, unbelievable. Because you know what? Unbelievable could be anyway. So at least you're giving a response and you're not putting people off either. So again, there's no rights or wrong. I guess that's the big takeaway, isn't it? There's no right or wrong.
It's a very
but
experience.
just be open. And if a person doesn't respond, don't take it as a rejection or betrayal. It's not. It's just that today maybe it's more difficult than tomorrow. And again, if we can focus on today, we're going to get through today. Today is the best day. It's the best day we have.
Reminds me of that quote, which I know I'm going to butcher, but something about being kind because you never know what battle other people are facing. And I think that's a great reminder, especially for those colleagues who you might not see every day or might not have an understanding of what happens.
Yeah. And a lot of times people don't want everybody, the whole world to know. And that's their choice. Mm-hmm. And I think we all have those individual choices to make. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, when someone is no longer with us, but also as someone is in the process of dying, people might not, some people don't want to share that maybe with their coworkers. Right. And, it's something that the person's wishes or,
that's their control.
Should drive. Yes.
Absolutely. What you control is so important.
I want to wrap us up with not really a question, but a word that I noticed come through very much in many of the questions are coming through. People are saying grief is debilitating. This feels debilitating. And it is, this is really something that is, like you said, well, it's a hole that'll never go away.
Yeah.
And just, to acknowledge that this is hard. It's not something you can't exercise the pain away or sleep the pain away.
And it's not easy.
Yeah.
And there's no book that I can say, open this book and when you finish it, you'll be healed. It's not like that. It's not a straight journey. It's the up and down, the ocean, learning how to swim.
Very true.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Thank you, Kathy, especially for all of your insight today. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that there was something in here that was helpful to you wherever you are, or, people may be on this grieving process. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you, CancerCare. And we will be in touch shortly with the recording, resources, and the survey. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.